Welcome to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, brought to you by Pilma. This podcast helps lead lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Here is your legal marketing expert and host, Ken Hardison.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Ken Hardison, and welcome to another episode of Grow Your Law Firm. And today we have the honor to have Victoria Collier with Quid Pro Quo. Welcome to the show, Victoria.
Thank you, Ken.
So today we're going to be talking about what a lot of lawyers are thinking about right now, especially my age. The baby boomers are entering that stage where they're thinking about exit strategies and really don't know where to start or what to do. But really, it's like everything else. You need to be thinking ahead of time for your exit strategy and how you're going to do it. So I brought an expert on today to talk to us about it, and appreciate you doing that for us, Victoria.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here. Like you said, people don't think about it soon enough. So I'd be happy to help educate anyone as early and as often as possible.
All right. So tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get to with this Quid Pro Quo, and what is that company? Because I know you're a lawyer too.
Yeah. So I started off as a lawyer. And before that, I started off as a paralegal. So I was in the Air Force and was a paralegal, and then did that on the private sector until I finished law school. And right after law school in 2002, I started my own law firm doing elder law, estate planning, asset protection. And that really came to me as a niche, which was really, really early on in that niche profession called elder law. But I had been a nurse's aide in a nursing home and just did hands-on care with senior citizens. And I just loved the population. Couple that with being a veteran and being able to help veterans at the end of their life, it just was perfect for me. So I did that. I started my own law firm right out of law school. And I built that up to over 7 figures for about 5 years. And then I sold it in 2020, actually right before COVID hit. So the timing was good.
It was, wasn't it? I was talking to a lawyer the other day, and he bought a law firm right before COVID. And he said that he still had a few struggles because it was a PI practice. And of course,
all the courts are shut down.
Cars quit. Yeah. So, but he's going to make it.
Go ahead.
Didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No. So after that, I knew that I wanted to have a farm. And so I had bought a farm and I started farming, and which was also good during COVID because wide open spaces, and I didn't get cabin fever a whole lot. And I was able to really connect with my kids in a way I wanted to, which is very different than, living in the city, which we still have a city house. But people, my colleagues, kept coming to me and saying, how did you do that? Can you help me do that? Because I had been coaching lawyers since 2008 on how to have better law firms, how to niche their law firms, things like that. So my name was already widely known throughout the United States, especially in the estate planning world. And so I took the opportunity to go ahead and start helping. I had already become certified exit planning advisor when I still owned my law firm, because that helped my estate planning clients transfer their businesses or sell them. And so I was already credentialed in that way. But a second credential that I got after I sold my law firm was how to value businesses. And specifically, I do valuations just for law firms. And so that's something else that's been incorporated into this. So Quid Pro Quo is the business I started because of the request and the demand from my colleagues after I sold my law firm. And I named it Quid Pro Quo because it means an equal exchange of value, which is what I think it should and always is ultimately at the end of the day what it's about.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Have you found there's a difference in evaluating firms that are like domestic firms, or where there's fee up fronts versus contingency based firms?
I would say that there's a difference in negotiations, but not always in the actual valuations. A business is a business, and there's certain characteristics that go into the valuation. And it's more than just what is the income you received last year. But that's where the negotiations come in, is what was the income you received last year? And what you'll hear from people who are negotiating PI firms, well, that's unpredictable. Well, that's a whole lot of mass tort, and those are, a crapshoot. You either win really big or you just spend years and win nothing. And so on one hand, I'm not surprised at the argument from the buyer, because they want it at the least amount of money possible. So of course they're going to use that as their argument. But on the seller side, if you can show every single year has been consistent or growing, and you can show the processes as to why you can value the cases in how you value them, then the valuation of the business itself should support the asking price. And I would say that, Ken, that's the second area, especially with PI firms or any kind of litigation, is, the buyer wants the seller to value what their cases are that they still have pending. And then the buyer will come back and say, well, I can't trust your valuation. Well, you've got to start somewhere and you've got to do something. And so how do you value a case? So I would love to hear your experience, because I know you've sold a couple PI cases. And you see it all the time. But, that's the conversation I hear going back and forth.
Yeah, I agree with you on the trends. Like if you got a company, a law firm that's trending up, 10, 20% each year, look at the last 3 to 5 years. And it's going to be worth a lot more if it's trending up than if it's trending down, for sure. Mm-hmm. But I think that if you have got a good level, we can show each year what your average fee was, and maybe take out the outliers, or leave them in there. It depends on if you have one about each year or whatever. When I call outliers, like a $3 million settlement or a $10 million settlement or a $20 million settlement, something that's right. Or the mass torts. But yeah, I think you can predict. And then what I really like what you said is, if you've got the systems and the processes where you can show them that predictable, that you're going to at least take in this many leads and you're going to sign up this many cases and they're going to have this average fee, then you're not really buying a pig in a poke. I mean, you kind of know what you're buying, right? I mean,
you should. And if you don't, then you shouldn't even be considered buying to begin with, because you have your own business to get into shape before even thinking about buying another business, if you don't understand those basics.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the big deal, and that's why I stress. I mean, I always stress about processes and everything in systems, so you're not held hostage by your present employees. But I think even bigger, for your exit plan, you want it so that you got everything documented. Because I mean, I've seen, not maybe law firms, but I've seen companies bought just for the processes or for their list. I mean,
absolutely. That's what provides the predictability. And that's what people ultimately are buying, is the predictability of the income that they would like to expect.
Yeah. So what do you recommend? This is something I always kind of struggle with, is a lot of lawyers, if their name is like my old firm was Hardison and Cochran or Hardison and Leon or whatever. And, but I'm seeing more of, I think should you put it in a name that's more generic? Like we got a member you called it the Recovery Law Firm, out in Honolulu, and he did that specifically because when he got ready to sell it, plus he just doesn't like a lot of he likes to keep to himself. He's not good. Don't want to be in front of the limelight. He kind of likes to be underneath the radar.
It's like the anti-PI lawyer, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of trade names where they're appropriate and certainly ethical under the bar rules, because you can transfer it easier. People can buy it easier than your own name. However, I don't think it's a huge detriment to have someone's personal name on there. The question is, are you willing to sell the name, and for how long? And then from a buyer standpoint, what is your strategic plan with that name? Do you plan to have it forever or a period of time? And so for me, it all comes down to just planning the exit, planning the purchase, and you can work around all of those solutions if you have enough time. to do that. And so I think when you have your own name, it just is a longer transition strategy than when you have a trade name.
Yep. I agree. I think it's just, it goes against everything, the way we always done things, but I'm seeing it more and more with PI firms.
Yeah. I like it. I like knowing that when I'm looking for something, I can identify with the name of the firm if possible, whereas a named person, I don't know, what law you do. Yet that is history, that is tradition. And I think though it does tie into, the emotional side of exiting is this is my name, and my name is on the door. And that ego is a really big hindrance. And I don't mean ego in a bad way, like I normally do, like, get your ego out of the way. What I mean is that, you have built this up. When your name's attached to it, it's just emotionally harder to separate and exit.
It is. I mean, it's like you're leaving a legacy and you don't want nobody to screw it up either.
Right. Especially if they're going to keep your name. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, yeah, for sure. So what do you advise lawyers when they come to you? What do you see the biggest deals biggest problems or biggest issues they have?
I would say the biggest issues are, or the hardest for us to work with, are the solo practitioners that wear it like a badge, that they're so very proud that they're solo, and that they are making $250,000 and they expect to make 250,000 to 500 on the sale, and that's just not going to happen. And they're certainly not going to get cash up front for that. And so it keeps us in what I call the dark ages of law firm sales, because you just can't sell that kind of practice fast, and you certainly can't sell it for top dollar. And so, sometimes they're left without having representation, or they're left without being able to sell it even on their own. So I would say the opposite side of that are businesses, even if they're small. I mean, you don't have to be a big business to be able to sell your firm for good money, but you do have to have some sort of team members that's going to carry on the knowledge of this firm, even when you're not there. You have to have some sort of systems and data so that the buyer knows, what to even offer or what to accept as a purchase price. But I have seen firms that, like, literally, I've actually sold a firm that they had no bookkeeping accounting system whatsoever. When we handed over the financials, we literally were handing over bank account register statements. And that's just not how you want to sell a firm. That's certainly not who I want to represent, although I did on that case. That's not a business, right? So the more business you can be, the better you can sell your firm. The more lawyer person proud you are of what you've done over the last few years to help people, the less likely you're going to be able to sell your firm.
That's interesting. I do. I think that's the big problem. And just like people, when they sell their house, they always think it's worth more than it is. Because of them, it's theirs. I see that in law firm. All owners think it's worth more than it is, and sometimes it's hard to get the reality to sink in. I don't know if you find that, but that's what I find.
I do. I actually see both ends of the spectrum. One is it's not worth anything because when I leave, there's nothing here. That's one end of the spectrum, and then the other is, just expecting so much more than it could possibly ever be worth because they heard something online that they should be able to get X or a multiple of X. And I'm like, I don't know which industry you're looking at, but that's not our industry. And so I see the polars. And so, I'm often trying to pull people to the middle. But the second thing I see a lot is that, hey, I've decided today I want to exit, and I've got lots of time. I want to be out in 3 months. Well, that's not lots of time, and literally someone just hired me like the middle of last year. It's not a great firm to sell. And, I got an email earlier this week saying, hey, we were supposed to be done with this last year. Get on it. Boom, boom, boom. I was like, okay, because that's how it works. Just because I decide to get on it. So, but anyway.
Yeah. So what do you recommend? Like if you're planning to exit about 2 years out, 18 months?
I would say that if, first of all, I'd say it varies greatly. I mean, I literally have sold firms within 3 months of when they hired us. We valued it, we positioned it, we were under contract, and we sold. I've also been sitting on a firm for about 20 months now, and I don't know that it's ever going to, to sell at the price that my client wants it to sell. So number one, service type that you provide, what kind of law do you do, has a factor on the length of time. Where you're located has a huge factor on the length of time. And again, how business oriented you are, if there's profit, what's going on in the economy, things like that. So I would say from a safety standpoint, from a comfort, non-stress, non-give it away, non-fire hose kind of sale, yes, I think 2 years is a great planning piece, a great planning piece.
Yeah. Yeah,
If it
because you want to up
happens,
the value. You want to up the value.
exactly.
Well, what are you seeing out there? Because there's a lot of, I call it New York money, but I mean, it's a lot of, or hedge money or investor money or whatever that are willing to go out here and loan lawyers money to start new firms in Arizona and buy other firms. I mean, I'm seeing that. I don't know if you're seeing it, but the interest rates that they're charging, I don't see how lawyers can, I guess they can do it, but I think they gotta, I mean, I don't know.
I'm hearing about it, but I haven't personally seen it as far as investors, basically enrolling lawyers to be that front person while the investor is buying it. There's one that's close right now that I'm negotiating with that sounds very similar to that, that wants to buy one of my clients' firms. And we're talking in the multi millions. First of all, I think that in the way that it's designed in Arizona and Utah for non-lawyers to own law firms, I actually like the concept. I think it has a lot of merit behind it with regard to being able to offer services to populations that are underserved, but also to be able to really maximize the efficiencies of running a business while lawyers get to just do what lawyers love to do, which is do the law piece, right? Where I find that it's not orchestrated very well, and I'll use Arizona as an example, is that, in Arizona, and then how our states are all independent from each other, is that I can't go in and just own a law firm in Arizona as a lawyer or as a non-lawyer. I have to apply as a non-lawyer, which is fine because I'm not licensed there, but I'm under the same standard as all those that don't even have a law degree anywhere, right? And then because I do have a law degree somewhere else, it actually might interfere with my ability to practice in the state that I have a license if I own another law firm in another state. And so I think that there's legal issues across the states, which actually deters actual lawyers from owning law firms in other states, whereas non-lawyers can do it without issue. So I think there's problems there.
Yeah. So do you ever have any that are, you ever selling law firms that are paid cash for, or is it all finance?
Oh, absolutely. My very first one was all cash up front, and it was less than 500,000. I sold one last year that was all cash up front, and it was over 500,000. And I have one right now I'm under contract that I am due to close on, knock on wood, next month, that is over $1 million, and it's all cash up front. So we do see them, and I love it when it happens. But I don't think that people should still expect that as the norm. I think that it is something that we should see more and more often, especially with the likes of SBA loans and private investors. But I don't think it's the norm, but I have seen it, and I'm happy when I do. So.
Yeah, let's talk about the SBA loans, because I had a deal where I was working on, and the lawyer went and borrowed money from SBA to buy this law firm, and they loaned him like $2 million. But I think the deal is, was it under 5 million or something that you can get these loans to buy business?
Either 5 or 10. I thought it was up to 10, but
it might be 10. I'm not sure, but you see any of that going on? I mean, I've only seen it once, but
all the two that I have closed on already, one was less than a million, less than 500. The other one was more than 500. They were SBA loans. I was looking to buy a law firm, and with the real estate with it, it was going to be just shy of $1 million, and I was getting an SBA loan for that one. But above $1 million, I haven't seen it yet, because the one that we're due to close in the next month, I don't believe that's an SBA loan. I think he's just getting a regular business loan from a bank.
So
Although I will say this, I was talking with a client today who's selling his firm to his associates, and apparently he was told, and this is not verified with an SBA expert, but he told me this morning that they've changed some rules, but he can sell up to 50% of it. The SBA will fund up to 50% of it, and he can still stay involved in the firm and continue to work for the next 2 to 3 years, which often when you sell as an SBA loan, you have to sell 100% of it, and you can only work as a 1099 for up to 12 months. So this situation for him, he's going to sell 50% of it to his associate. He's going to stay on for 2 to 3 years and then sell the other 50%. So it actually is a beautiful situation for him and the associate.
yeah, I would think for the associate, yeah, especially because it's hard for them to come up with the cash, right? I mean,
Right. And so my client gets at least, the cash up front, still gets to stay there and make sure the firm is succeeding, and the associate is now partners. So it just sounds like a win-win-win.
Yeah, good deal. Anything else you need our listeners and viewers need to know about? They need to be thinking about.
Yeah, I would say that, what we're dancing all around right here is what's it worth, right? And so I would say that the number one thing is, don't wait till you're ready to sell to find out what your firm is worth. You should, just like knowing what your investment accounts are worth every quarter or every year, however often you look at those, just like you look at your tax statement for your house and see what your equity is in that every year. I would say that we all need to be doing that with our law firms as well. This is one of the most significant assets that we either have or could have if we build it properly. So know what it's worth. And unfortunately, many people, like your traditional accountants, they don't know how to value specifically a law firm because it's a services business. They want to treat it specifically like it's services and not like it's an asset. Just like, you would basically value a solo practitioner like you would value, a business that has 4 partners and things like that. They're not the same. And so I would definitely, number one, get your law firm valued regularly, like you would any other asset. And number two, do it by somebody who really understands the value of law firms and how they differ from other businesses, and even how they differ from each other.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest question I get all the time. What do you think my law firm's worth? And gosh, there's so many things. I mean, I remember when this has been 30 years ago, but I had my CPA was selling. I said, "What are you getting?" He said, "I'm getting 1.5 my annual billings."
Yeah.
Well, that's that was pretty much, I don't know what they go for now, but law firm owner, you hear businesses, EBITDA, what is earnings before taxes and the depreciation, all that stuff. But multiples and all that. But I don't know. But I'm going to ask you. I mean, a lot of times when it comes down to it, what I see law firms sell for about 1 year of gross revenues. But I mean, it could be a little lower, a little higher. But that's kind of a starting point to go either way. I don't know.
Well, it's a starting point for sure. It's a starting point, but like when you've got somebody who's making $1.3 million gross, but their net is negative $39,000. Why would you buy that for 1.3?
Well, that's true.
You wouldn't,
Yeah.
So I think net is is much more predictive of your success in the future. And what I'm seeing is a multiple of net, generally somewhere between 2 to 3 times net. But the question then is, well, what's all considered part of net, right?
Yeah.
Because you can manipulate net so much. And so that's where your EBITDA comes from. And so now we start really looking at what is the seller's discretionary earnings, because that's a combination of net and what goes in your pocket, but maybe is a line item expense, and things like that. So
Like your big navigator that you bought for tax reasons, or
things
the
like that. Yes, things like
yes,
that.
yeah,
So yeah, so I mean, it'd be nice if we could just have a simple, say, oh, simply it's just 1 times whatever or 3 times whatever. But if you really want true value out of it, and if you want to get a loan, if you're the buyer, it's a bit more complicated than that, as it should be. So as it should be. So
yeah. And I'm not saying I do that or anybody else, but sometimes
yeah.
people write off things that are sometimes could be questionable in audit.
Oh yeah. And I'm not here to judge any of that stuff. That's what I'm saying is a true valuation is going to be able to pull those things out and be able to give the true value as to what the business is, right? And that's the best we want on
Yeah.
both sides.
And you're right. And I know with Pilma, in our masterminds, I mean, we part of the deal every time they come, they have to show what their gross and what their cost of lawyer's compensation and what employee compensation is, then what their net profit is,
Mhm.
and it varies anywhere from 15% to 45%. I
Right.
mean, it's all over the place. And I would
Right.
definitely pay a lot more for 45% than I would for 15%.
For sure. Unless, for example, Ken, and this is, I mean, this is the nuances that that is number one fun, but two that people just don't realize. I'd rather pay 45% than 10%, let's say, for example, except that, let's say, for example, the person who's only getting 10% net is paying themselves as an owner a W-2 salary of $300,000, whereas the 45%, they're
Right.
not paying themselves anything. And what they do take home is part of that 45%. You might actually do better buying the 10%. And that's where, having somebody who's neutral can go in there and parse out and say, this is what the real story looks like. And that's what I tell people is like, you tell me a story, they tell me a story, your calendar tells me a different story, your P&Ls tell me a different story. I'm going to go in there and tell you what the results are based on that, not based on what you think in your head or your heart.
Yeah. It's funny though, because when you ask people, they say, well, I'm pretty sure it's this. It means they have no idea. I
Yeah,
mean, that's what I felt. I was like, what's your average fee? Oh, it's probably around 10,000. They got no
right,
clue. What's your conversion rate on your sign it? Oh, I'd say it's somewhere around 90%. They got no
right,
clue. When
right,
they
right.
say it's probably, or I don't think it is, or yeah, you really need to know your numbers. I think that's a big deal. You need to know your numbers before you start selling this deal.
Absolutely,
And you got to know them
absolutely.
before you start paying the money. You got to know what the numbers are. You got to know, it's all about the numbers, right?
It is. It is. I mean, that's the only way you can get in and out without the emotions of it. Because at this point,
Yeah.
it's business. It truly is just business, and
Yeah.
it either
And I
makes
think
sense or it
one
doesn't.
good thing that I've got out of this today is I know some lawyers that would love to sell out to their associates one day, but they don't really want to finance it all. They want some cash too up front. I mean, because they're like some safeness, right? Because
Yeah,
anything can happen. They can run it in the ground or whatever.
that's
And
right.
I think talking about this SBA loans, if this new thing is right, what you're saying, I think our listeners, if you're a senior, owner and thinking about selling out to some associates, this is something really worth looking into because the interest rates are not that crazy. The banks that loan the money are getting guaranteed from the federal government, so they're not taking big risk either. I
Hmm.
don't know. I mean, it's and there's a guy that comes to every Pilma event. I call him the SBA guy, but I mean he'll sit there and tell you with no fee whether or not you can get a loan or not.
Yeah.
I mean, and help you through it. I mean, so to me it's a no-brainer.
No, I agree with you. It's a no-brainer. And, that's the one thing I hear all the time from owners when I ask them if they plan to sell to their associates is the owners will say, well, I don't think they can afford it. Well, shame on you for not paying them a wage where they can afford it, but shame on you for not exploring what the other options are as
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's whatever, yeah. All right. So if somebody wants to get up with you, Victoria, and talk to you or hire you or whatever, what's a good way to get up with you?
the best way is to check us out on our website, which is quidproquolaw.com. And more education on this very kind of topic is we also have a podcast called Smart Lawyers Position to Transition. So I would say check that out as well.
Yeah. And I had the privilege of being on that. Thank you.
Yes, you did. And it's one of our best listening downloaded episodes. So I'm glad you were there. Thank you.
No problem. All right. Well, listen, thank you so much. And until next time, this is Ken Hardison, dedicated to your success.
You have been listening to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, the podcast that leads lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Go to growyourlawfirm.com to find more ways to market and manage your law firm. Please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts.